Hi everyone, my name is Maggie, and for this history book talk, I chose the book A People's History of the United States, written by Howard Zinn. Just a couple of quick facts. The author Howard Zinn is known for being an author, playwright, political activist, and much more. He grew up in Brooklyn and fought in World War II, where he flew bombing missions, and he's actually known for saying that this experience greatly affected his strong belief in the importance of knowing history and knowing a true history. He obtained a BA from NYU and a PhD from Columbia. He's also well known for being fired from a teaching position at Spelman College for being involved in and supporting the civil rights movement. And after he was fired from Spelman College, he went on to teach at Boston University until his retirement. So he's very well versed in the study of history and definitely a scholar on the topic of American history. The publisher for this book is Harper Perennial, and it was first published in 1980. It was published several times, all the way up until 2003. He continues to add to the book as big moments in history continue to happen. But the book that I have, even though he passed away in 2010, the book I have was published in 2015. But the only reason it's any different from the 2003 is that it has a new introduction by another author. But this one has 688 pages, and I got it on Amazon in paperback form for $13.29. And I plan on using this as a passage dive in my social studies classroom. Why I chose the history of the United States, there's a couple reasons. The first reason is the content. Zinn tells the story of America from the point of view and in the words of the everyday American. Reason number two is the versatility. This book can be used in a ton of ways. It can be used for passage dives. There's also poems in here from like Langston Hughes. It can be used in a lot of ways. Reason number three is the debate surrounding the book. When I was researching what book to choose, I saw that this book was actually an Arkansas representative tried to get it on a list of banned books from Arkansas curriculum in 2017, so that piqued my interest. And then my PK-12 CE uses this book a lot in her classroom, and she actually encouraged me to read this, and she said that it made her a better social studies teacher. Just a quick synopsis of the book, I guess. There's 25 chapters covering all of America's history. Just for example, up here I have chapter 1, which covers Columbus, the Indians, and human progress, and chapter 25 titled The 2000 Election and the War on Terror. The book tackles really tough topics such as racism, corruption, reform, and the book is kind of set up where you can see the everyday American kind of clashing with the politicians in the government, or what he sometimes refers to as the elite or the establishment. And then, once again, he tells America's history from the point of view of women, workers, minorities, immigrants, and the working class. And he includes a plethora of firsthand accounts, which are crucial to understanding America's true history. Here are just key points. It was kind of hard to come up with key points for this. I'm not gonna lie, because the book is kind of structured in each chapter kind of hits a different historical event. And so there's like major themes, but there's also just a ton of content. So I did a little research to help me come up with these key points. But my first key point is that Zinn focuses on American people who have the least power and political representation, and who are least likely to be treated with respect in society. So throughout history, that is minorities, women, also like just workers. Like he gets into labor unions, and it's just really interesting to hear history from that point of view. He also focuses on the clash between the least powerful Americans and the most powerful Americans. And the most powerful Americans you'll see throughout this book, if you decide to read it, he calls the establishment or the elite. Another key point is that Zinn often discusses reform in a different way. He makes the argument that reform strengthens the government and the elite and doesn't always help people. And I found that interesting. I actually have two examples. So in the early 20th century, he talks about how women won the right to vote. But as he sees it, winning the right to vote is a classic example of reform, but not in the sense that we think of reform. He says, since women's victory did not address the root cause of sexism and misogyny in American history, it was really a reform for the establishment. It's very interesting. He makes the same argument when he talks about the civil rights the Civil Rights Act of 1965. He's saying that, yes, we're giving these minority groups the right to vote, but since we're going through the government to do it, and we're not really getting to the root causes of misogyny and the root causes of racism, it strengthens the government and the elite. It's a really interesting take. And then key point number 4 is he often makes the argument that most decisions made in America are motivated by profit of some kind, which I think is something that we all know. But he talks about this often in war times, where it's the elites that are making the decision to go to war, and then the working class are affected by that. They're the ones that are being rooted out of their lives and having to go and fight. They're the ones that are having to make changes at home to deal with the fact that we're at war. So just really interesting takes, different than what we're used to hearing in the social studies classroom. And then I chose 2 quotes. The first quote is from chapter 1, and I think it just kind of sets the tone for the book and kind of sets the tone for Howard Zinn as a person. And it reads, "If history is to be creative, to anticipate a possible future without denying the past, it should, I believe, emphasize new possibilities by disclosing those hidden episodes of the past when, even if in brief flashes, people showed their ability to resist, to join together, occasionally to win. I am supposing, or perhaps only hoping, that our future may be found in the past's fugitive moments of compassion rather than in its solid centuries of warfare. That, being as blunt as I can, is my approach to the history of the United States. The reader may as well know that before going on." I think it's great that he tells you right up front exactly how he's going to approach this book, and he kind of gives you an out if you don't want to know the tough history of America. And it sets the tone for the book, and I think it's an awesome quote. And the last quote is found in chapter 17, and he says, "The memory of oppressed people is one thing that cannot be taken away, and for such people with such memories, revolt is always an inch below the surface." I think that's super powerful. I mean, saying the memory of the oppressed people is one thing that can be not taken away. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, he is acknowledging that a lot of our history books, we don't talk about we talk about the oppressed, but we don't get into the nitty gritty and what life was like for the oppressed. We talk about the reforms and, like these great things happened out of this really bad time, but we don't talk about how it was affecting everyday Americans, and especially the minorities and the women. We talk about just the working class is sometimes just like what we use. So it's just awesome. It's really interesting take. I give this book a 4 out of 5, and the only reason I give it a 4 out of 5 is because it can seem one-sided while you're reading it, but I think one thing to keep in mind, and it is actually something that Howard Zinn said, is that he wants this to be used to balance out the textbooks that we're already using in the class, to be used as a supplement, so that we're getting, our history books are always pretty much known for just telling history from the victor's side, but this book is telling it from the everyday American side, which I think is really important to understanding history and help us think more critically. So anyway, that's why I give the book a 4 out of 5. I definitely think this is something that you should use in your classroom. I'm not saying that it should be used as a textbook. It should absolutely be used for supplement. I wouldn't give this book to my class and say, "Hey, read this and let's talk about it." I would use it as a supplement. I would definitely talk about whatever historical subject, like say for the Civil Rights Movement, for example, I would teach the Civil Rights Movement, and then I would use this as supplemental deep dive passages, or diving into passages, or just as another resource. I would not use it as a textbook. And that's all I have. Sorry I kind of went off on a tangent there, but thank you. That was my book talk. If you guys have any questions, I am looking forward to answering them in the discussion board. Thank you, everyone.